Hi, hello, welcome back. My name is Devraj, and I'm back with another book review of a classic book from the field of body-based therapy. And I don't know if I'm going to do so many more of these, but yeah, maybe I will. Maybe I'll really get knuckled down and get into it. But I did manage to complete reading Wilhelm Reich's Listen, Little Man, which is, you could call it a short book or a very long essay, perhaps. It's a book which is sometimes people in this scene kind of recommend people to read it as an introduction to who Reich was, and because it's quite short. And other people tend to tell people to avoid this one, and go for that one over there or something like that. So, Listen, Little Man is essentially just a kind of 70-page long rant by Reich, in words, I mean, originally in German, translated into English, about people that he's known in his life. So he's literally just, and you little man, you did this and you did that, and you wonder why your life is so bad because you don't do this and blah 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 blah. And it is basically just a rant. It's Reich clearly very fed up with what he perceives is, he's been on his mission to kind of liberate humankind, since the 1920s or so, when he began with Freud in Vienna, and essentially criticised and put down and attacked and marginalised by the very people that he is trying to liberate, which is the man in the street or woman in the street. And so I think all of this dissatisfaction and frustration had clagged up inside of him, and he just decided to have a massive kind of brain dump for like 70, 80 pages and just rage about all the kind of little men that he dealt with in his life, and how he tried to help them, and how he wasn't going to try and help them anymore. He was going to do his own thing, and this kind of stuff. Now, whilst he doesn't actually name anybody specifically in the book, as far as I can recall, what he does, it's quite clear that the focus of his ire is shifting from time to time, from a more generic kind of man or woman in the street, in Austria, or in Norway, or in the US, the countries where he lived and worked, or to more specific figures. He's referring to the times when he was accused of something in his laboratory or whatever. By it's clearly pointed at someone, though he doesn't name that individual. So Reich is, he's just using this. This book is really just Reich's catharsis, just raging it all out, and it would be kind of, I don't know whether Reich felt better for doing this and just publishing it, but that would be interesting to know. For me personally, it reminded me of something in my own life, really, as a therapist and as someone getting into therapy, because I came in, well, not right at the beginning of my therapeutic journey, but pretty early on into the Osho scene, from who was formerly known as the Bhagwan, and he was an Indian mystic. And then a lot of Western therapists gathered around Osho, and plied their trade and extended their trade, and his ashrams, in Pune, India, and in the USA became like a hotbed of new therapy. And one of the kind of features on a kind of directional mental level of this environment was that we were going to change the world. That was the underlying feeling. We were going to clear all our stuff out and go out into the world and totally change the world. And so, whilst I didn't do any training and therapy in the time that Osho was actually alive in the body on the earth and that kind of thing, I came along about a decade later, around the millennium, but that energy was still there. We're going out and we're going to change the world. We're going to liberate mankind from whether you see it, character structure, or just repression, or sexual repression, or lack of self-belief. The idea was we're creating this big kind of spiritual therapeutic army to go out and really change the world. And so I came into an environment that was very much charged up with that energy. And where Reich's book kind of reminded me was of that feeling, we're going out there for people to change the world. And like Reich, on a much lesser level, when I actually kind of graduated as a group therapist and started to work with people before actually I got into the bio, I'm kind of charging at them, hey, I'm doing this to liberate you, to set you free. I was charging at people. And then particularly working in the UK, where it is kind of well known, the British have a lot of hostility just underneath the surface, and they try to be nice. But if you come at them a bit fast, then they're going to get you're going to get a hostile reaction. You're going to get a lot of negative judgments. You're going to get all sorts of manipulation coming back at you. And certainly when I originally began practicing as a group therapist, and I would come with this energy, pretty soon it's like, wow, I'm getting a ton of stuff back. And I had to look, how do I want to come out from myself towards people as a therapist? And over like the course of a few years, I just really got into like permission and, being really clear in advance, even before people arrived at a workshop, how intense it was going to be, not kind of trying to suck them in with kind of nice flowery words in the description, and then they come and it's like a massive kind of self-encounter, but just being much more clear and honest. And I developed that over the course of a few years, and it really worked for me, and even now I have basically the same kind of principles in how I hold space for people. And so this book of Reich's really reminded me of that conflict, that period of change within my own life early on as a therapist and a workshop leader. And, when I look back at Reich and what he achieved, which was considerable, even though he never really got the acknowledgement from the mainstream, he was subject to a lot of ridicule and persecution, but he didn't back down from his position. He just kept going, researching what he wanted to research, because, as he says, I think in the math psychology of fascism, it may take humanity thousands of years to develop to like a next level, and we need to keep on researching this stuff and writing up the results or putting them on some form of media so they can be preserved for the future, which is a viewpoint that I'm 100% behind. Now, if we look at like this character, this little man character that Reich kind of rants at throughout the book, what's kind of clear is that he's massively an endurer in many ways. He's someone who's learned to keep his head down or her head down and just survive life. And in a sense, so he's like the endurer. And then to kind of comfort him in his endurance and in his survival trip, he gets involved in a lot of gossiping. He puts other people down. He's got this kind of, crabs in a barrel kind of outlook where if one crab tries to get out, famous story, if one crab tries to get out of the barrel, the others kind of reach up at the last minute and drag him back down. He's got that kind of energy, he's living in a hole, basically, and his way of dealing with it is to keep other people in the hole around him. And anyone kind of suggesting, hey man, you could just get out of the hole, that is a threat in many ways, because it's very scary, particularly for someone who's in the endurer character, to put their head up and take a risk. And that is because as a 2-year-old or 3-year-old child, when their parents came down harsh on them, that felt like a survival threat inside the child. That's how our nervous system and brain at that age work. Having a parent really give you a heavy energy, we learn, I have to sublimate everything. In order to survive, I must push everything down. And so, in a sense, whilst Reich spends this whole book ranting at the little man, I wonder if some of it could be slightly better spent understanding this dynamic. Understanding that the conditions of childhood created this survival threat to the child, and then they learned this behaviour and then continued like that throughout their lives. Of course, I'm not sure, because character structure has changed over the years from the few therapists that have worked with it extensively. And so I don't know, I'm not sure if Reich really understood the endurer or masochist, as he called them in his day, if he understood it in that way. Because for myself these days, I don't look at character structure so much in the context of, okay, what's our body type? What's our posture? That's an element, but it's a relatively small element to me. How I much more see character type these days is in terms of safety strategies. Safety strategies that we either learned or more likely were just, genetically activated by our nervous system in very early infancy. And then once that pattern of behavior was established under certain triggers from the outside, then, it perpetuates throughout life. And there is a physical component, but it's a little, especially with the way society has changed since the 1920s and 30s, it's a little difficult when I look at most people these days to easily say what character structure do they have just by looking at their body. Some are a bit of a giveaway, but many, like the very big endurer or the very tall leaving pattern type, but most it's more complex than that. There's more diverse influences going on inside of them. So, to sum up this aspect of a review, I'm not sure if Reich himself really understood his masochist character, the Endurer, as a safety strategy. Another aspect of this book that I find quite intriguing is, as I've written about in my own book on character structure, is this dynamic between the aggressive character and the Endurer. That the Endurer basically does not really want to move his ass. He will work for sure, but does not really want to move his ass. And then the aggressive is kind of determined to move his ass, to do something to get him to move his ass. And these two characters get very easily locked inside a battle, when they're working together in a team. Maybe the aggressive is the team leader and the endurer is one of the members of the team. They get locked in this psychological battle, or within an individual with an aggressive side and an endurer side. These aspects, it's one foot on the gas pedal, one foot on the brake. And so I think, with Reich so focusing on this masochist endurer character in Listen Little Man, he's also somewhere really plugging in to this dynamic between the aggressive and the endurer. Because for me, the endurer is only one of the three pre-egoic character types. The other is the oral and the other is the leaving, or what Reich would have known as the schizoid. And yet, to me, reading Listen Little Man, it's very focused on the endurer type. And so I imagine that is basically, that's an aspect, because the endurer will push back, undermine, gossip, and do all these kind of things. Reich has really locked into this dynamic and has become the aggressive character, trying to get this world full of endurers to move their asses and get with the therapy and liberate themselves. Okay, so I think I've actually said a little bit more than I was intending. It's kind of interesting making these little chats because whilst I'm doing it, I kind of get insights myself, and then I have to kind of, is that right? Whatever. But thanks very much for tuning into this. If you're interested in my work in character structure, you can check out my new book on the subject at the link below, or bioenergetics.org.uk. And I will see you later for some more insights and workouts around body-based therapy. Thank you.